There are genuine Men in Black type encounters that at the very least are from classified intelligence operations. This has definitely happened. So maybe that's the Men in Black phenomenon. I don't know.
I think the agencies in America need a better fashion advisor, to upgrade their costume.
What they really need is a civilian-based judge and jury system to prosecute them and investigate them. But yeah.
Yeah. So one thing is the uniforms, but when we talk about the agencies and stuff, you mentioned that NSA was rather unknown in the beginning, but which agencies do we have a solid case for in one way or the other is involved in the cover-up and maybe also the technology, the science of these aircrafts?
Well, I'll answer that on two levels. So one is in the confirmed declassified literature, what agencies have definitely had an interaction with the UFO phenomenon. Yeah. Those agencies, without a doubt, are the CIA, the FBI, all of the military intelligence, Navy intelligence for sure, but also Army intelligence and Air Force intelligence, all of them. The Defense Intelligence Agency, that is the DIA, has had definite interaction with this phenomenon. And I'm basing all of these claims on the declassified literature,
sure,
the declassified documents that we have. All of these agencies have described this. Also NORAD, North American Air Defense. Now, in the case of NORAD, since the Reagan era, they have been completely exempted from Freedom of Information Acts. NORAD can voluntarily release information if they choose, but they are not obligated legally to release anything whatsoever. Having said that, there's outstanding documentation, at least from the 1970s, showing that NORAD also was tracking significant UFOs violating sensitive U.S. airspace in the 70s. So,
what about NASA?
Yeah, NASA. Yes, NASA has had interaction with this phenomenon without a doubt. You've got, first of all, you have the testimony of many U.S. astronauts from the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs who have discussed very openly objects that they saw in space that they were not able to explain. And, even most recently, Buzz Aldrin, who is a guy whose head I would love to get inside for a little while and know what he's actually thinking. Buzz Aldrin, a couple of years ago, made the statement that on their way to the moon, this is long when they're out of Earth orbit, out of close Earth orbit, there was an object that was outside their command module that they didn't know what it was. He put this statement out there. Now, you can't say that this is a satellite. I mean, they're past all of that, and they're on the way to the moon. And then a day or two later, he made a correction to the statement. And he said, "Oh, it's my understanding that we simply we had ejected. It was an ejection from the craft, and it was something else that we had seen there. It was one of our own things." But honestly, his explanation just did not ring true, and it seemed that he was very much. I mean, think about it. 40 years had gone by, and Aldrin had been thinking about this, and he literally did not get an explanation for 40 years, and then he says it publicly, and then they correct him publicly. I find that very difficult to believe. Yeah. So I think NASA certainly has connections. There are a number of NASA employees from the 1970s onward who've talked about NASA involvement in the UFO phenomenon.
Like Ken Johnston. And,
Maurice Chatelain is the one who comes to mind most. He was a very, I forget his exact position, engineer, I think, worked at NASA for a number of years and talked explicitly about UFO knowledge inside NASA.
Isn't there other astronauts too? I remember often seeing the names of Cooper and Mitchell in this mix.
Well, yes. Gordon Cooper, who I never knew, and Edgar Mitchell, who I do know, both have spoken very explicitly about this. Gordon Cooper may be the most qualified pilot that NASA had. Many people felt that he was the best. When he was a U.S. pilot in Germany in the 1950s, he talked explicitly about his encounter with UFOs there. And then over at Edwards Air Force Base in 1964, he did not see it directly land, but he spoke with Air Air Force personnel who came running to him with photographic evidence of a landed flying saucer that they spoke to him at. And he said he looked at the negative after it was developed, and he said it absolutely looked like exactly what they were talking about, and then said that those negatives were confiscated the very next day by men in black suits.
Of course.
And then Edgar Mitchell, who was in Apollo 14, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon, never said that he saw a UFO, never said that he saw an alien being, but has spoken explicitly, at least for a while he did, about ultra-high level connections that he had within the U.S. government, who spoke to him explicitly about alien bodies and technology. And, when you're an Apollo astronaut like Edgar Mitchell, who's not going to want to be your buddy? So he can really speak to a lot of these individuals, and this was Edgar Mitchell's statement, which I think is quite interesting.
Oh, indeed.
The other agency that I think is important in the cover-up that very few people talk about is the NRO, that is the National Reconnaissance Office. And we talk about the NSA being secret, but the NRO is even more secret. They were founded in 1961, and for 30 years, it was a felony for any member of Congress to mention the NRO in public.
Wow.
So it was incredibly secret for a longer period of time than the NSA was, and to this day, there's very little. We know that the NRO monitors, or at least we're told that they monitor all of America's spy satellites. So classified satellite. So they're in space. That's what they do. And I think that there's been some very good analysis connecting the NRO to monitoring UFOs, particularly if you have a component of this phenomenon that is in space, UFOs in space, Earth orbit. The NRO would absolutely be involved in this. And there are a couple of these cases that we know through the 70s and 80s and 90s of objects being tracked by our satellites. So,
what about DARPA?
Yeah, DARPA is an interesting one. I haven't really researched the DARPA connection to UFOs, and perhaps I should. Certainly, DARPA is very, very key in developing advanced technology for the United States military. And right now, we hear a lot about DARPA creating Terminator-style robots, I think is really what they're getting in the news for. I don't know, but I would assume that some of this information comes their way.
Yeah, they get the goodies.
I would think so, yeah.
They are more like...
but I don't know.
No, but the trail probably ends at their laboratories. They get the goodies and they make it.
Yeah. I think what happens is, one of the things that's been important for me to discuss with this cover-up, and this includes the Breakaway Civilization, is the privatization of the secret itself.
Right.
So people talk... they ask, well, how can the government keep the secret? And I think, when we say something as loose and broad as the government, we're really not doing ourselves any favors. No. I think what happens is that these secrets become privatized. It's not simply that they become classified, they become proprietary information. So if I'm the U.S. Army and I've recovered something, again, I'm going back to the alien crash retrieval, but let's just say, so I have this highly, highly exotic technology. Who's going to study it? Who's going to, well, the Army might have some pretty smart scientists, but ultimately I'm going to need to give it to Boeing or Lockheed or Raytheon or General Electric because they've got the manufacturing and they also have the scientific and research and development people who can study this and actually do something with it. And they're contractors. So at some point they get it. And then the question becomes who owns it? Who owns the technology? They'll make some breakthroughs. They will patent whatever breakthroughs they make. And really, as far as the rest of the world goes, it's simply a breakthrough at Boeing. It's simply a breakthrough by Bell Labs.
So some corporation owns it, but then we have to look at the structure behind the corporations. Who owns the different corporations?
Well, exactly. And this is a really hard thing to do. I've tried looking into this. Like who are the dominant shareholders of the dominant corporations? This is really tough to find this information.
There is a very good TED talk on this, not from a UFO approach, of course, but just in general.
Oh.
Because it's been a lot of focus on the so-called superclass.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about tinfoil Illuminati conspiracy theorists here. I'm talking about researchers who established that there is like 300 families and 6,000 people at the top of our current hierarchy.
Well, and this is mainstream news, but the top 80th,
yes.
The 80th wealthiest people in the world have as much wealth combined as the bottom half of humanity.
Exactly.
The top 80
Yes.
Less than 100 people have as much as quantum happiness.
So this should be identifiable people,
Exactly. So, what are the corporations that they own? What's the percentages? And
then there's cartels. They hide behind,
Yeah.
structures like that. So.
And as you say, this is not tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. This is facts. And then, ask yourself, well, will these individuals be inclined to collaborate amongst each other to get what they want? And then the answer obviously is yes. They're in the best position to do so. Not people like you and me who have, no wealth, but those who have tremendous means and who obviously know each other, probably talk with each other. Yes, they are the most likely individuals to get together to talk informally about because these are the people who can manipulate governments. And this is what the Bilderberg meetings are about every year. So
yes, but then the question begs itself, how much do they really know? Because these guys are owners and cashing in on stuff. But then again, if I'm in an agency or in a black arm of an agency where I have a team flying around here, there, when there's no oversight, when there's compartmentalization, I control what to tell the people behind. So a big question would be, because you have already implicated all agencies in America. So the big question is, which one of these agencies do you think have black arms where they're hands-on playing with this?
Exactly. Who's actually, and your point is an outstanding point. Just because the top wealthiest people are in a position to control, it doesn't mean that they really even care or are managing it. They have their own people.
Yeah.
Right. They have their own organizations. So presumably, even someone like David Rockefeller, would have maybe his own individuals who might be his point men. Maybe.
I mean, the president don't have a need to know basis. The president, who's so-called overseeing many of these agencies, the same could be the case in private industry.
No, absolutely. I think your point is extremely well taken. So the question is, and who and where is it? And I don't have the answer to this. I think what we have in the United States system is a black budget system of what are called special access programs, and then unacknowledged special access programs. And there's a whole nomenclature of terms to describe the deeply, deeply classified nature of the American national security empire.
Yeah.
And within that structure, which many analysts other than myself have also said this is privatized. We're talking some mainstream analysts here, that it's primarily dominated by private industry. And the fact is that no one really knows who's running it or how much money it takes in. What we know is that it's a black empire. It's a black budget empire that we don't have any control over this.
I imagine CIA and NSA are deeply involved.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think, and also Navy intelligence, U.S. Navy intelligence there just are too many connections that we've had over the last 60, 70 years that have connected Navy intelligence, also Air Force intelligence. So my guess is that there is a small clique that has control over the whole thing. I mean, look, you've had researchers talking about MJ-12. I think an organization like MJ-12 makes the most sense, to be perfectly honest with you. You'd have a very small group of people, and they have their connection to the intelligence community, also the international intelligence community, also private industry. You've got to pull a lot of strings here. You have to be able to manage the media and make sure that the establishment media continues to play along.
Oh, they do a good job of
That's right. And then the political institutions. And so that would require a very high level, group of puppeteers who are really pulling the string.